Now these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and unto them were sons born after the flood. The sons of Japheth, Gomer, and Magog, and Madai, and Javan, and Tubal, and Meshech, and Tiras. And the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, and Riphoth, and Togarmah. And the sons of Javan, Elishah, and Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. By these were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands, every one after his tongue, after their families, in their nations. By these were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands, every one after his tongue, after their families, in their nations. And the sons of Ham, Cush, and Mizraim, and Phut, and Canaan. And the sons of Cush, Sabah, and Havilah, and Sabta, and Ramah, and Sabtecha, and the sons of Ramah, Sheba, and Dedan. And Cush begat Nimrod, he began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord, wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod the mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. Out of that land went forth Ashur, and builded Nineveh, and the city Rehoboth, and Calah. And risen between Nineveh and Calah, the same is a great city. And Mizraim begat Ludim, and Anamim, and Lahabim, and Naphtuim. And Pathruzim, and Casluim, out of whom came Philistim, and Caphtorim. And Canaan begat Sidon his firstborn, and Heth. And the Jebusite, and the Amorite, and the Girgasite, and the Hivite, and the Arkite, and the Sinite, and the Arvadite, and the Zemarite, and the Hamathite, and afterward were the families of the Canaanites spread abroad. And the border of the Canaanites was from Sidon, as thou comest to Jera, unto Gaza, as thou goest, unto Sodom, and Gomorrah, and Admah, and Zeboim, even unto Lasha. These are the sons of Ham, after their families, after their tongues, in their countries, and in their nations. Unto Shem also, the father of all the children of Eber, the brother of Japheth the elder, even to him were children born. The children of Shem, Elam, and Ashur, and Arphaxad, and Lud, and Aram. And the children of Aram, Uz, and Hul, and Gether, and Mash. And Arphaxad begat Salah, and Salah begat Eber. And unto Eber were born two sons, the name of one was Peleg, for in his days was the earth divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. And Joktan begat Armodad, and Shaleth, and Hazamaveth, and Jura. And Hadaram, and Uzal, and Diklah. And Obal, and Abimael, and Sheba. And Ophir, and Havilah, and Jobab, all these were the sons of Joktan. And their dwelling was from Mesha, as thou goest unto Sephar a mount of the east. These are the sons of Shem, after their families, after their tongues, in their lands, after their nations. These are the families of the sons of Noah, after their generations, in their nations, and by these were the nations divided in the earth after the flood.
Around 2800 BC, there lived a hunter named Nimrod in Babylon, which was located between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. Whenever wild animals threatened the people, he protected them with his power. As people respected and supported him, Nimrod became arrogant and incited people to build the Tower of Babel.
Come, let us build a tower that reaches to the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the face of the whole earth.
Such deeds of Nimrod that were against God has continued even after Nimrod had died. Semiramis, Nimrod's wife, insisted that Nimrod became the sun god. She cut Nimrod's dead body into pieces and sent them to each tribe of Babylon. People regarded the place where a part of Nimrod was buried as sacred. She also claimed that Nimrod was reincarnated as her son.
The sun god Nimrod was reincarnated as my son Tammuz. He who believes and follows Tammuz follows Nimrod.
As Semiramis ruled over Babylon in place of her young son Tammuz, she maneuvered people into worshiping her. Monuments of Semiramis carrying her child Tammuz in her arms were set up all over Babylon, along with various images symbolizing the sun god. The sun worship and the mother-child worship, which was a scheme devised by Semiramis, put down roots as a religion of Babylon. Idolatry stemmed from Babylon, spread to many countries after the Tower of Babel collapsed. It is because when the Babylonians were scattered over the whole world, they brought the sun worship and the mother-child worship. The sun worship and the mother-child worship were assimilated into the cultures and religions of many countries, and they came to have various forms and names. Nimrod, the sun god, was known as Mithra in Persia, Sol in Rome, Ra or Horus in Egypt, and Apollo in Greece. Semiramis and Tammuz, who were the start of the mother-child worship, was called Isis and Horus, Venus and Dionysus, Diana and Attis, and Astaroth and Tammuz, respectively. Besides these, the image of goddess, who is holding a baby in her arms, was venerated in many countries of the world. If so, was the mother-child worship the creature of an age, which was especially welcomed only in Babylon? Surprisingly, the mother-child worship of Babylon has been passed down through the thousands of years and still exists today. In Vatican of Rome, we can find the mother-child worship in its original state.
I want to talk to you today about mother and child worship, which is something that started, of course, as all false doctrines did, or most of them anyway, in Babylon. Starting with Semiramis and Tammuz, but also from India we have Devka and Krishna, or Isi and Iswara. From Egypt we have Isis and Osiris, or Horus. Then from Greece we have Irene, or Ceres, if I'm pronouncing that right, and Plutus. And then, of course, Roman Catholicism focuses on Mary and Jesus. And also from Rome we have Fortuna and Jupiter. I didn't have those pictured at the start of this video, but you have those as well. But it all started from the deification of Nimrod and his wife Semiramis and their son Tammuz, who's also known as Bacchus. For some reference, you can look up The Two Babylons by Alexander Hislop. Now, Semiramis is also known as the Queen of Heaven, and I believe that the Catholic Church refers to Mary as the Queen of Heaven, which is pretty strange. If you look at Jeremiah, there are the only references I know of about the Queen of Heaven And that's in Jeremiah chapter 7, verse 18, and then also in chapter 44, verses 17, 18, 19, and 25. Chapter 7, verse 18 reads, "The children gather wood, the fathers light the fire, and the women knead the dough and make cakes of bread for the Queen of Heaven." And then in chapter 44, verses 17, 18, and 19, we read, "We will certainly do everything we said we would. We will burn incense to the Queen of Heaven, and will pour out drink offerings to her, just as we and our fathers, our kings and our officials did in the towns of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem. At that time we had plenty of food and were well off and suffered no harm. But ever since we stopped burning incense to the Queen of Heaven and pouring out drink offerings to her, we've had nothing and have been perishing by sword and famine." The women added, "When we burned incense to the Queen of Heaven and poured out drink offerings to her, did not our husbands know that we were making cakes like her image and pouring out drink offerings to her?" And then in verse 25 we read, "This is what the Lord, with Yahweh Shaddai," your Bible would say the Lord Almighty, but that's Yahweh Almighty, "the Elohim of Israel says, you and your wives have shown by your actions what you promised when you said, 'We will certainly carry out the vows we made to burn incense and pour out drink offerings to the Queen of Heaven.' Go ahead then, do what you promised, keep your vows. But hear the word of Yahweh, all Jews living in Egypt. I swear by my great name, says Yahweh." Why does he swear by his name? Because there's nothing higher he could swear by. "That no one from Judah living anywhere in Egypt will ever again invoke my name or swear as surely as the sovereign Yahweh lives. For I am watching over them for harm, not for good. The Jews in Egypt will perish by sword and famine until they are all destroyed." No one from Judah living anywhere in Egypt will ever again invoke my name. Who invokes his name at all anymore? The Queen of Heaven, they burn incense to her. Catholic Church, Mother Mary. Another strange thing about this is that, you have the mother and the son. The son is also known as the father and the lover of the mother. Satanic for sure. Sexual immorality, prostitution, and perversion is the integral part of worship here, attempting to undermine the divine order of the sexes established by Abba Father, Yahweh, where womankind is seen as dominating the male. The mother, little baby, the woman is dominating the male in all of this, even as the woman who rides the beast in the book of Revelation. And note again, this is an attempt to undermine the divine order of the sexes. People get upset about this. The Bible puts woman below man, makes her out to be a lesser being. That's a lie from the pit. The Bible does not make women out to be lower beings. The Bible shows that Yahweh has a hierarchy. There's the Father and there's the Son. The Son obeys the Father. The Son honors and lifts the Father up, glorifies the Father. Then you have man. Man honors the Son and the Father through the Son. And then you have the woman who honors the male, her headship. This is God's hierarchy. And it doesn't mean that a woman is a lesser being and is to be stepped on and oppressed. That's not mentioned anywhere. People, refer to places in the New Testament where it says women are supposed to be quiet in the church and they're not supposed to speak. Well, you have to understand the times. Back then, the women were all on one side, the men were all on the other. The women were not allowed to be educated, and they had questions, and they would be shouting to their husbands on the other side of the room and creating a bit of chaos. And that's what's being referred to. It's not saying that, women should shut up and keep quiet and, be bound and gagged. This is just Satan's way of distorting God's truth and making people think that he's saying something he's not. But there is a hierarchy. Abba Father makes his Son equal with himself. But that does not mean, the Son obeys the Father. The Father is in authority over the Son. That does not make the Son a lesser being, especially since the Father's made him equal. And so it shall be with the B'nai Elohim, the children of Yahweh, those selected as the bride of Christ are going to be made equal with the Son and the Father. Well, that doesn't mean that, they're on total equal standing. They still have to obey the Father. Well, a woman is supposed to look to her husband as her headship, and she is supposed to obey him. That doesn't mean that he should take advantage of her. The Bible makes it very clear he needs to love her, but he is the head. It's the male's job to teach his wife and his children God's word. Any man who is married and has children is not doing that. If there's problems in his house, and there will be, it's his fault and no one else's, and he is held accountable. This is God's hierarchy, and the devil wants to distort and destroy God's system, and the devil wants to destroy family, and he does it with these tricks. Don't be fooled, and be aware of these crazy doctrines. God bless.
Apollo, the sun god. Apollo, the Greek and the Roman solar deity, occupies a rather prominent place in both the pantheons. Commonly associated with the sun, the story of the Olympian deities began when Zeus, along with his family, usurped the rule of the Titans, who held a prominent place prior to the Olympians. Helios was a titan of the sun, which, in simple terms, means that he was the original Greek sun.
Fight me! Though today Apollo is most often called the god of the sun, in ancient times his identity was more complex. He performed many deeds by night, shooting his arrows hidden in darkness upon the Greek troops assailing Troy. He summoned wind for sailors, plagues for those who'd incurred his wrath, good health and long life for those he favored, and arrows of death for those whose time had come. He is called upon for aid in battle, to guide the spears, javelins, and arrows of heroes, or to brush those of their enemies aside. He is in the Iliad and Odyssey, the oldest of the Greek sources on Apollo. There is little indication he was thought to be the exact equivalent to the sun god Helios. Yet he has always been called Phoebus, meaning bright, shining, radiant, from which was derived the word Phoebazo, meaning to prophesy. Apollo was conceived by Zeus and born of Leto, but Queen Hera, discovering this infidelity, was furious. She watched out from the heavens and forbid her to give birth to a child in any place fixed in the earth or any place where the sun shone. His connection with the protection of flocks and herds is perhaps part of the reason he is connected with the wolf, as a protector of the flocks from the wolf. But one of the first great acts of Apollo was the slaying of the dragon called Python, variously said to have been the consort of Typhon, the beast that his father Zeus had to confront and defeat in a hard-fought battle. In some myths, it was sent by Hera to pursue Leto as she struggled to find somewhere to give birth. Apollo sought vengeance against it, a common theme associated with the god. In other tales, it was simply a nasty beast guarding the place of Delphi, where the god was wont to set up his temple. Slaying it with 100 missiles, he gloated, saying, "Here shall the earth and shining Hyperion make you rot." He comes then upon a spring that has been hidden, and he smashes apart the stones that covered it, liberating the waters and causing them to flow as a beautiful stream down to the sea. Then, desiring men to build him a great temple there, he spots a ship upon the sea and comes to it in the shape of a dolphin. With a mysterious wind blowing, the ship carrying the men and the dolphin, they land near the site. The dolphin springs up like a star at midday in flashes of fire, with a brightness that reached to the heaven. He then lit a fire at the site of his shrine, showing the splendor of his shafts, and the light of that fire filled the entire region, but the people were terrified. And then he appears again in the form of a man, and came to his hijacked sailors with a generous offer. "Stay here and build a temple and receive great abundance on behalf of the god." And so the site was named Delphi, after the form of the dolphin that he took to acquire his first priests. To them he gave knowledge of the deathless gods, and of what was yet to be. Though the dragon is suggested to be a pestilence of some kind, it is curious that it is located at the site thought to be the center of the earth. In this way it may relate to a very ancient myth of a dragon, which is located at the root of the cosmic tree that grows up from the center. Various scholars suggest that the myth of Apollo replacing Gaia at the site represents a later Greek supplanting of an earlier pre-Greek earth goddess worship. This is likely not the case. Across Indo-European myth, gods associated with sky and consciousness are seen to take command over aspects of the material cosmos. Often it has nothing to do with replacing previous gods, but is the consciousness or spirit ruling over things or places. To bolster the argument, early female figurines are sometimes provided as evidence, but these actually come from the site of a temple to Athena nearby and are almost certainly early votives to her or a goddess associated with her. So although often mentioned, the idea that Apollo supplanted an earlier earth goddess at the site is not supported by evidence. The legend is part of the cosmological understanding of the development of Apollo. The first to rule was the earth, who was in the first. Then it was Themis, goddess of natural law, and directly associated with Apollo. Then it was Phoebe, Apollo's grandmother, who then passed the site on to Apollo. It is really just another way of showing Apollo's connection to prophecy, divine law, and mental illumination, little different from his actual genealogy. Another popular fable to dispel is that the Pythian priestess sat above a vent in the earth that leaked gas, and this caused hallucinations. This idea is linked to sensationalized articles that ran after it was discovered that there was such a vent near the site, but it was unlikely to have leaked gas into the temple during any time the temple was active, and even if it actually ever leaked, there's no evidence that it did. There is simply evidence that there is some sort of trapped gas under the earth in the area, but there is no evidence that this gas leaked out or that it was connected with the site in any way. So with that out of the way, right after the dragon is slain, Apollo liberates trapped water and creates a spring, fitting in with the general dragon slaying motif found in later European sources. Akakadis, the daffodil, Daphne, the laurel tree, Chrysothemis, the golden natural law, who is associated with agriculture, but also Koronis, the crow, Hyacinthos, the hyacinth, and many more. In general worship in certain areas, Apollo is strongly connected to agriculture and the harvest. One of his largest festivals, the Carneia, is connected with the harvest, and Apollo is generally a protector of the crops, fields, and flocks. It may be through this that he became Lycaeus, the wolf god, for as the guardian of the flocks, he is a warder of wolves, but against those who have wronged the god, he may well set the wolves upon their flocks. This aspect of the guardian of the fields may relate to one of his most interesting myths, the death of Asclepius and the slaying of the Cyclopes, which combines nearly all the major aspects we have seen thus far. Asclepius is said to be the son of Apollo and the crow, and was a very gifted mortal doctor, who became so skilled in his craft he was able to prolong life and even raise people from the dead. However, the skill of raising the dead transgressed the natural order, and so Zeus killed him with a thunderbolt. Yet, as in all cases, when one connected with Apollo is wronged, it is not without repercussions. Though he would not seek retribution against his father Zeus, Apollo instead punished the forgers of his thunderbolt, the Cyclopes. He takes them down with his far shooting, then hides his arrow beneath a mountain in the north, perhaps suggestive of a volcano, and again suggesting a fiery aspect to these arrows. Zeus learns of this and decides to make Asclepius a god of health and medicine, and represents him in the sky as a serpent holder. And in certain renditions of this myth, it links the return of Apollo's arrow with the reaping of a bountiful harvest. A possible agricultural reading of this myth might be the good health of the crops which are in a stage of ripening is threatened by stormy weather. Apollo dissipates the storm clouds and drives off the thunder giants with his fiery arrows, creating the ideal weather for the final stages of the grain harvest. Certainly it is not a coincidence that Apollo is the one to kill the primordial gods of storm, and this is connected with his role in agriculture. But Apollo is also the father of Aristeos, a rustic god of shepherds, beekeeping, medicinal herbs, and most interestingly, the Etesian winds. These are strong winds that blow out of the north, and are called upon to alleviate the scorching heat, pestilence, and disease associated with the dog star Sirius. Aristeos was also said to have alleviated drought, connecting him with Zeus as rain god. Some accounts say that he was the son of Uranos, but most believe him to have been the son of Apollo, and likely the far shooter in more archaic times was thought to have greater powers over the general sky and weather than are preserved. To understand Apollo further, we need to look to the etymology of his name. Now, some believe it to mean the destroyer, and others see it as meaning one of the assembly, or as relating to a pre-Greek Anatolian name, Apilianos, a god name invoked in a Hittite treaty, and which may mean the entrapper. And others still look further east to Aplu, a plague god who is the son of a sun god. I am personally most convinced by the argument that his name comes from epelai, referring to a declaration, a boast, or promise, as this is directly connected to one of his main functions as the god of prophetic utterances, and fits in perfectly with the genealogy provided by Hesiod and others. So he is the son of Zeus, and thus a bright spirit of consciousness. His mother Leto, a name perhaps meaning obscure, hidden, or modest, is sister of Asteria, meaning fallen star, who fled from Zeus after the war with the Titans and became the island of Delos, the very island Apollo was born upon. She is a goddess of fallen stars and prophecies made by observing them. She is thus associated with the nighttime divination, and it would seem that most likely her sister Leto is perhaps the opposite of this, then associated with the daytime divination, and thus light. This dualistic night and day nature of the sisters is in some respects perhaps mirrored in Apollo and Artemis, who become associated with sun and moon. But the nature of the grandparents on the mother's side are often just as much or more critical to the nature of the grandchildren in these genealogies. Apollo was the grandson of Phoebe, meaning the feminine version of Apollo's own common byname, Phoebus. This means bright, shining, or radiant, as she was the titaness of illumination and prophecy, and the central axis of the earth, Delphi, daughter of Gaia and Uranos. His grandfather was Koios, meaning query or question, but he is also identified as Polos, meaning the central axis of the sky or pole star. As one of the 4 Titan brothers who held Uranos, he is the personification of one of the 4 pillars that hold the sky, the northern pillar, and Apollo is likewise strongly connected to the north and Hyperborea. Both grandparents and mother are connected to prophecy, and both are connected to the central axis points, with Phoebe a goddess of the prophetic mind and Koios of question. It seems probable that they are Titans representing the cosmic center from which flows all knowledge, but also around which moves the cosmos. The name Phoebe is used likely in relation not with the light of the sun, but with brightness and illumination as a mental state, that which is revealed, or the one who illuminates the mind. Apollo's place is at the center, either at Delphi or in Hyperborea, likely representing the northern pole. In Delphi, during the winter months, it was thought that Apollo journeyed to the north, and his presence left the temple. This is a strange thing for the sun god to do, as in the winter it actually travels south, but his disappearance does seem linked to the season. Perhaps he ventures to the north from the center of the earth to the center of heaven, where he rules over the music of the cosmos, represented by the movement of the heavens and stars, more noticeable during the winter with its longer nights. Apollo may also be linked to the heat and light of the sun, just as the Homeric hymn calls the light of the fire his shafts. With great insight, the Orphic hymn to Apollo references the sun as his eye, and states that all the differences in nature and their accord are the result of Apollo, and that the seasons change in accord to his music, with the seasons represented as notes on his lyre. Thus, the flow and harmony of the world are ascribed to Apollo as expressions of music. In Egypt, Apollo is linked not with Ra, the sun god, but with Horus, a sky god who had the sun and moon for his eyes, perhaps influencing the Orphic description. His name means the distant one, similar to Apollo being the far shooter. Yet though some have argued he was not associated with the sun initially, the Homeric hymn does seem to hint at this connection, if it does not say so explicitly. Helios is mentioned several times in the hymn, and Apollo himself invokes Helios under his alternative name, Hyperion, meaning the High One, and his choice in this name may also be to invoke the sense of distance which he is connected with. It is clear he wasn't the physical manifestation of the sun, but there is definitely a connection being made. Helios distributes the light of the physical sun and drives its course through the sky, but Apollo has much wider associations, most especially with that of mental illumination, totality, distance, law, and harmony. The sun is only one part of the aspect of Apollo. However, it might be that Apollo was at an early stage connected to the movement of the sun, and this is partly why he is connected to distance. A key point about the sun is the daily movement across visible space. In Vedic sources, the god Vishnu was said to create that space with 3 strides, and this appears to have been the spatial distance measured out by the movement of the sun. The god Savitar, sometimes equated with the sun, sometimes distinct from it, seems to have been linked also to this movement and inspiration of the sun, with his name meaning the impeller. He is strongly connected to the punishment and purification of sin, an element also key to Apollo. Perhaps also connected to this is his rule from the center. It is from the center that all things extend outwards, and which all moves around. Zeus was said to have measured out the world by flying 2 eagles from the edges. Where they met was Delphi, where the omphalos, or navel, was. Again connecting the site, and thus Apollo, with measuring distance. Music also is closely connected with measurement, as is the movement of sun and moon who traverse the world. The sun is said to measure out the world, and so it's possible that Apollo was connected with at least this particular solar aspect in the ancient period. Apollo's connection with wolves may also have a strange and unlikely connection with this celestial movement. People have long sought for an explanation as to why Apollo is consistently associated with the wolf. At Delphi, a bronze statue of a wolf stood before his altar. His mother was said to have been in the form of a wolf or accompanied by wolves when he was born. A myth tells how he directed wolves to suckle Miletus of Crete.